Hi, this is going to be a fairly short video on how to work with text files doing input and output from within Python. We have already used the print statement to print something to the screen so that the user running Python can see what's going on. And we've already used the input statement to see what's being typed on the keyboard. But except for very simple programs, we need to get data that's not something that's just going to be typed in. We're going to read data from a file, and a little bit later on in this course, we'll be reading data off of the internet. So, we're going to have to learn how to get input from places other than the keyboard and write output to places other than the screen. That's the purpose of this video, so let's get going. Opening a file for either input or output starts with an open statement. And here's the syntax for it. Open, and then in parentheses you need a string, constant, or variable that says what file to be opened. And then you put either quote R quote for reading a file, in which case it has to already exist, or quote W quote for writing a file. If it doesn't exist, it will create it. If it does exist, it will overwrite it. It won't append it to the end. It will overwrite it. So if you already had a file by the name of output.txt and you opened output.txt for write again, it would wipe out the existing contents and write new contents to it. So you give a variable name on the left of the equal sign. My file is going to be a file type object that you can use later on for reading or writing. So my file equals open, file name with an R, or my file equals open, file name with a W. Here's some examples of opening files. Input file 1 equals open textfile.txt R. Notice I did not qualify this file name. That means this file has to exist in whatever the working directory is of your Python program. So if you're running this from idle, as we will be doing for just about everything this year, then this has to be in whatever the working directory is for idle. However, you may want a fully qualified path name that says find it at this location on my computer, which may or may not have anything to do with where my working directory is. So here's something that says look on my C drive in the folder GOA class for the file textfile.txt. Notice how I had to put 2 backslashes in a row here. When you're specifying a file, say in your Windows Explorer, you only put a single backslash. Inside a Python string, we need 2 backslashes so that Python doesn't interpret this backslash along with the next character to be one of its escape sequences. So backslash means a backslash. That's something that you need to get used to in Python or pretty much any other programming language. And here's 2 examples of opening a file to write to it. Output.csv would be something that would be either created or overwritten in whatever the working directory is for Python. And here I've got a fully qualified name. On drive S, folder users, subfolder name, file name temp.txt. Now, what do I do once I've opened something for reading? Well, once the file's open and you have a file object, you can iterate on the file object, meaning you can use it in a for statement. You have to close the file when you're done using it. Now, each line becomes a Python string, and we know how to work with strings. In fact, Lesson 3B was all about working with strings, regardless of what type of characters are stored in it. So here's a little example of code, and this is really about all you need to read from a text file in Python. Here I've got my open statement. Whatever file name is, I must have set that value earlier. Maybe I used an input statement and asked the user at the keyboard to type in what's the name of your file. Open it for reading and put the file object into a variable called input file. Now I can say for line in input file. It's going to go through a for loop where the string variable line each time through the loop gets one more line of the file. And when there are no more lines left, the loop will be exited. A real simple way to read through your text file. And then I just am doing print the value of one line is line. Then input file dot close. Whenever I'm no longer reading from my file, I should close it. If you leave files open, they stay busy. Other programs can't use them. They tie up a lot of resources. And in the case of if you're writing it, not all of the data may get written to the file if for some reason there was a power outage and your program stopped and so on, and you'd get what people refer to as a corrupted file where part of it has been written and not all. So we want to get into a habit of when we're done using our files, closing them. Now here's another way that you can read from a text file. It's not necessarily a better way, it's just a different way. So I've got the same input file equals open statement, and then I can use the read method on the file object and get all of the text read into one variable, which I called all the text. Then I close the file. At this point, the string variable all the text has the entire file's contents in one variable, including new line characters and so on. But you've learned when working with strings how to split something based on new line characters or white space, how to strip things out, and so on. So this may be a way you prefer to read. It isn't necessarily better than what's on the previous page, it's just different. Here's another example. Input file, one line of text equals input file dot read line instead of read. This reads only one line of the text. It's like one step through the for loop on the previous page. Now, it seems silly to read just one line of text and close it. You would have to read more than one line, but maybe you knew that all the stuff you wanted was on the first line of your file. Dot read reads an entire file. Dot read line reads up to the first new line character. You can keep using the read line method to read all the lines. You'll know when you're done if what comes back from dot read line is the string that contains no characters. The string quote quote has a length of 0. Now, how do I write to a text file? Well, once you've opened your text file, you write string values by using the write method. And the write method just takes a string and it will put those characters into the file. So if you want to put new line characters in, like you want to write line 1 and then on the next line write line 2, and then the next line write line 3, you're going to put line 1, then the escape sequence \n, which says go to a new line, then line 2, \n, then line 3. Or I could do several write statements. I could do line 1 \n, then I could do outfile write line 2 \n, then outfile write line 3 \n, and so on. When I'm done writing, I make sure I close it. Now, we can combine using string methods with text files if we know what the data in the text file is going to look like. A format that's used frequently is called comma-separated value format, or CSV. This is something that an awful lot of programs can export their data in, such as Excel. You might have a big Excel spreadsheet that's stored in Excel's proprietary format, but you can also save it as a CSV file, and that gets printed out as a text file in which each row of your spreadsheet is one line of the text file, and each cell is separated from the next cell with a comma. In your programming assignment for weeks 3 and 4, you're going to be reading in some comma-separated value data that I generated in Excel and saved as a comma-separated value format. So let's say the file content contains Apple 20 1.79, banana 15 0.58. Maybe this is inventory for a store. Here's the item, here's the number on hand, and here's the price per pound. And maybe you've got lots of rows of this. Well, how can we read this? Let's say I do InFile equals open, and I've got the file in something called fruit.csv. I open it for reading. I'll go through a loop for each line in InFile. Okay, now I've got a line that has something like apple, 20, 1.79. I'm going to say list of values equals line dot strip dot split on commas. In other words, get rid of any leading or trailing blanks and then turn it into a list of values every time you see a comma split into another value. Then in this case I'm printing it out just so you can see it. Then I'm taking fruit name, which is element 0 from my list, and show that I'm going to do that correctly. That's my for loop. It happens over and over again for each line in the InFile. Once I'm done with the for loop, and I'm going to close my file. Here's the output from running that if the fruit.csv file had the data that I showed on the previous page, a line about apples, a line about bananas. I'm printing my list of values. My list has 3 elements. The first one is quote apple, the second one is quote 20, the third one is quote 179. Notice it will be a list of strings, even though I probably want to use this one as a number. But I also already know how to convert numbers to strings. Strings to numbers. And then I've got this print statement that says the fruit name in this row is, and I'm just printing out the fruit name. So the fruit name in this row is apple. Fruit name in this row is banana. So this will give you a real good head start on your programming assignment for the week. Happy programming.